Thank you everyone who has managed to attend and sign into this fascinating webinar. We're going to be talking about the FinOps journey today. And I'd like to start with a quick introduction. I'm really pleased to host this webinar today as head of sales at Zesty. I talk to people every day who are at varying stages of their FinOps adoption. And today I have the great pleasure to be joined by Shanit. Shanit has worked in infrastructure procurement for some of the largest companies in Israel, including 888, Checkpoint, and now at Amdocs. And in this capacity, she's acquired a deep knowledge of the complexity of managing financing of large cloud environments. In today's discussion, Shanit's going to be sharing some of her insights on what took place in order to create a best-in-breed FinOps strategy. So on this webinar, the agenda for the webinar is we're going to be first addressing what is FinOps, as it's still in some areas quite the question mark. And so we're going to be looking at defining this and understanding this. And then Shanit's going to walk us through exactly what was the journey that took place with her at Amdocs. Then Shanit's going to kindly share with us some interesting ideas or advice on how to get started in this journey. And finally, hopefully we've got time at the end for a question and answer session where I'm sure there's going to be some fascinating questions coming in. So let's begin. Let's talk about what is FinOps. FinOps, or financial operations, FinOps for short, is the intersection of people, process, and technology as it relates to managing financial operations of a business. Inform, operate, optimize are three components of the FinOps flywheel. So reflecting on such a broad definition, which spans disparate stakeholders, business units, and technologies, it's unsurprising that this strategy to include all of these elements can be complex and difficult to construct. And with this, it's really interesting that we get the opportunity to hear from somebody who's been through it and can help tell us a little bit about what it took to create a FinOps strategy. With that, Shanit, thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm really, really excited. As Alex presented, I've been with Amdocs for almost 4.5 years. When I arrived, actually, I got this amazing opportunity to start and define what is cloud procurement. This was the task I was given. When I started off, I had to really learn a lot because, like Alex said, I come from a long history of technology procurement, but this is something that was, well, relatively new to all of us, especially 4.5 years ago, when it was like, well, the cloud exists for over 10, but for enterprises such as Amdocs, it wasn't something that was widely used. So where I started, and if you know procurement people, don't assume the worst on me. I know we're kind of great boorish people, but still, you know, we're looking from a very specific angle of expenses. And for myself, the way I see my role is the responsible adult. And being the responsible adult with cloud is very challenges, and I will go through it with you along the way. So I started off with mapping everything. I wanted to know, since Amdocs is like a company of companies, so a lot of companies acquired, and they have their own processes, their own policies, their own credit cards. This is like a red flag credit card, oh no. And then other parts of the company which are working in R&D for a while, have their security, you know, they know how to work in an environment which is on-premise, but not really know how to adapt to the cloud. So we had all sorts of different users and different use cases. So I started off by mapping first of all, the users, the payments that they were using, the agreements they were having. So let's say if we acquired a company, they already had some kind of agreement. This is something that for commercial perspective, I had to understand and really have everything visible for me. And the use case, what are the needs? So when I'm looking like in the short-sighted future, what is the requirement that I need to address? So this was the first step. Part of this mapping was also to recognize all the stakeholders. So as the responsible adult, I took it upon myself to see really like legal-wise, which would be not only the agreement, but the privacy issue that I imagine many of you did encounter. And we have security, which of course is a very big issue with the cloud, especially when you're talking about legacy enterprises. There's a whole methodology that found itself like contradicting to the cloud. They had to adjust. They had to really, those 4 years were quite a journey for them as well. But they were a very important stakeholder if you want anything to move in a way which is legit and not like off the grid, then we have to really make everything in a process that can work and be agile to an extent, not be a process that on the one hand ignores the needs of the company, or on the other ignore the needs of the user. So you need to find kind of a way to mitigate this thing. So legal, yeah.
Can I double click on that for a second? On the stakeholders part, which business unit was it who had the original idea and concept to say, we need a FinOps strategy now? We've grown, we've got so much taking place. Let's start developing this and working on this. Where did that lie?
Oh, that's such a good question. So actually, well, working with corporate IT, the Cloud Center of Excellence of Corporate IT was the most accessible way for me to have the information to what is actually happening. And of course, I had to touch base with all the other units. And it's funny, but actually it came from me because it was already 4.5 years ago. But when I needed to have some visibility to everything that is happening, and I'm not a technical person, so well, I have some background, but I'm not hands-on in any way. I said, guys, I really need this information in some way accessible to me. I need your assistance. And so it started as a service basically for me and the budget managers after it. But really it started from my need to see everything. And then, because I'm sure we have here on the call those guys, you guys, tech guys, that you just don't care about the budget, the procurement.
Right.
You just, I know what's going on. I'm very responsible. That should be enough. Well, it's not really enough in a corporate and in companies that has some kind of process of monitoring the usage of the budget. So I really wanted to take the process that was already happening procurement-wise and other stakeholders, as we said, the security, the legal, and we have others as well. Compliance, software compliance is our stakeholders as well, all sorts of stakeholders. So I really wanted to take the process that was already happening and approved, and everybody are used to it in our company, and see how can I apply it to the cloud. So we had to find a way that really supports the same process, while understanding that the issue is that if I'm buying a server, an on-prem server, it's very easy because it's like I have a fixed price for it. This is the amount it costs, and that's it. When I give somebody a cloud account, it's like I've given them a credit card. And Amdocs in general does not give credit cards to their employees. Okay. I'm sure most companies don't. And even the ones that do still have the guidelines where you use it. And this is a real risk. So I was actually fortunate enough to meet my first lesson in the first 6 months. We had some kind of account. We had an account, a production account, that encountered some technical issues. They were working with a vendor. They solved the issue. 3 months later, I get the invoice to be paid 10 times what we expected, 10 times the budget. So it was a lot of money, like huge.
Wow.
And this is a lesson that you never forget. And it kind of changed the whole process. And when everybody said, no, it's just a tiny account, I said, no, no, I know you. It's not gonna, if something gonna happen and you need to service the customer, it may go. So we needed, that's where we understood, to your question about the FinOps, it like all tied together when at this event happening, that we need A, full visibility, B, more online monitoring as online as possible. Because we can get, surprised 3 months later. That's way, way, way too late. That was like $250,000 too late. It's a lot of money. Yeah. So that's where it came from. And what we did, and I'm going forward to where we are now, and 4 years later, we have this online form. We have a process that any employee of the company can submit a request to have a public cloud account. The definition, so let's say the parameters that he would insert into this form will determine which kind of approvals does he need. Does he need security approvals? He doesn't, legal or others. It's all defined by what he chooses. And if it's just a small R&D environment, it could be like in an automated process in a matter of minutes, really minutes. So it was important for us to design the process when we, as much as possible, don't lose the agility of the cloud and give the user the experience he would have if he would have used it with his own credit card. So really, really easy where we can. Where we cannot, well, we need to mitigate the risk. And I think that some of the risks are ignored or go unnoticed, like, and we discussed it when we, at our previous call when we had, like if somebody decides that they don't want to wait the process, they're creating now an account on their Gmail email. This creates a huge risk that it's sometimes, the user would be blind to the risk, because what is the damn? I mean, it's just a free, maybe they got like, I have like a gift certificate,
Sure.
Yeah, you get those $100, $50, I don't know. What's the harm? Nobody pays for it. It's the harm if it's for company use, because it exposes the company to all sorts of legal and other risks. So this was really our first intention, was to prevent the risks. And risks comes from 1, security, 2, legal, and 3, of course, budget. So as I said, now we have this process that goes through the whole, all of the stakeholders that should really approve such an environment. If it was an on-premise environment, it would have gone through the whole process. So there shouldn't be any difference. And we have, and the length sometimes it takes months, I admit it, but sometimes this would be because it has a complexity security-wise, or the architecture is very secure. I'm a big believer in preparation. I know nobody likes to take long preparations, but then the whole thing is a smooth sail. You see today, I read a lot of the articles that are talking about hybrid cloud and people that, companies that went up the cloud and now are going back to the on-premise. And I think it's lack of preparation. And I think this is really a message that I want to relay, because if you open an account and say, well, it's just a teeny tiny account, nothing will happen, nobody needs really to, to monitor it, it's just a few tiny things. I can tell you that 4 years ago, we were tens of accounts. Now we are hundreds of accounts, closer to thousands of accounts.
Wow.
How do you manage it? How do you manage it? So you can't, you need to look ahead and see where you're going to be in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and really create the infrastructure to support it in terms of company policies. Boring company policies, I know, but they're there to protect you. I promise. They're there to protect you.
It's some fascinating insight. I hadn't really considered that the FinOps strategy is as much about the financing as it is about the risk and compliance. And in order to meet all of those objectives, which are all fundamental objectives of the business, we need this strategy, which is going to be all encompassing in place.
Yeah, because FinOps, like finance, is just one of the, it's one half of the FinOps, right? We have the whole operation thing, which, and you know that discovery tools, which are part of the compliance, are really something that is being developed intensely over the last year. And I know Amazon is having a lot of work going around this, and other companies going into this, expanding their on-premise to the cloud discovery tools.
But what's so interesting as well about what you said is when designing the process and how you're going to have this strategy is you wanted to enable the benefits of the cloud, the speed, the agility, the doing things quickly, that was also a core component in how you're designing your processes.
Definitely, because what's the point in going to the cloud otherwise?
Right, exactly. And so how were you able to see that and build that into your objectives, to the processes that you built?
I think by really the first step of mapping. So mapping the different use cases, the different needs, and then creating different routes per use case. So we enable as much as possible. Also by implementing automation as much as possible. And definitely we still have some automation to go, definitely. But I think it became my favorite word. And it was really hard, by the way, getting it past security, the entire automation thing. Amdocs developed its own automation because security wouldn't approve third-party automation. Right.
That's absolutely something that I discuss regularly with customers on a daily basis, in how they would appreciate to be able to move quickly into the cloud and to benefit from everything that the cloud has to offer at a fast pace, but security and compliance is a big challenge in managing to get that done. And so overcoming that obstacle is clearly something which is very beneficial for really taking advantage of everything that the cloud has to offer.
Totally. And I do want to stress another issue, which is the visibility that we haven't actually discussed, but the visibility is actually a huge enabler, So Amdocs created our own dashboard and using Power BI. And why we did this, even though there are tools, is because the company is built in a certain way. It has a certain process that finance and budget managers are really on top of it, let's say, because there are different P&L units, and it's all different budget owners. There are about 40 different business units using the cloud. Each has a different budget manager and other stakeholders within the unit that needs to get the information in a non-technical way. Most of the tools that we've seen had a very much technical feel to it. And another thing is that we didn't want to use the dashboards of the cloud providers, because we don't want to get into the situation where a budget manager has a user to AWS or Azure. That's not a good idea. I mean, and also like with the experience wise, it's not something that you want. So we have the budget managers, they have an SSO to the system, to the dashboard, and it goes very smoothly, very easily, connected to our AD, to our Active Directory, and it's working very, very well. But really, I'm stressing the visibility. Sometimes you just need to create something that is in alignment with the needs of your company. It's not always that one, off-the-shelf tool will provide all your needs, and sometimes, of course, it will. I mean, if you're a cloud native company, it should be easier. But still, us people, procurement, finance, you need special ed for us. I mean, we don't. We can't handle this all, the very technical dashboards. It's too many clicks also, by the way. Maybe today, too many clicks.
That actually brings me on to one of the question which I wanted to ask you from the outset is, what were the challenges that you experienced when you started on this, and what would you say that would be similar challenges to other people starting on this journey now?
First of all, even for the stage of the mapping, how do you find all the accounts? I literally had to, to have the vendors assist me, to ask them, AWS, listen, I need to know any account that is under this, this, and this, and this domain, because we are companies of companies, not all of them on amdocs.com. Some of them are different companies which we acquired. I need to know everything. So I had to work with them in order to get the visibility. This was the first challenge. The second challenge was enrolling. Wow, enrolling people, not easy at all. So I was fortunate enough to have the IT Cloud Center of Excellence team enrolled from almost the get-go, like pretty much from the start. So at the beginning, they looked at me like, when we would sit for strategy meeting and said, huh, what strategy? I mean, yes, but we're not there yet. We're not at the big agreement yet. And yeah, I know, but I need, in order for me to create an agreement which supports the company's strategy, I need to understand what are our needs currently, what are we looking at. So it was really to create this environment. And today I can say that this team and myself, I'm considered part of the Cloud Center of Excellence team, which is a huge honor for me, because I don't take it for granted at all that any IT person would, would wholeheartedly insert one of the bad guys, procurement guys, into their, very close inner circle, which any decision that we made around cloud strategy, or not any decision, but a lot of the decisions were made jointly together. I was part of the process, and I think that's the heart of success. Enrolling. The challenge at where we are now, or answering where we are going, is now we are implementing the final. It took us 4 years, but enrolling the entire company to work with one system. It's not easy when you have, so many business units and P&Ls and different companies, different users, to work with the same dashboard of IT, to get serviced by IT. I know it may seem for some of you very, very, obvious, but for some parts of the company that are customer facing, it seemed weird to be supported by IT guys, which are mainly labeled for the internal use. So like, what? They're internal use, not production. They don't get us. They don't understand us. It took us time to build a dashboard and to build a service that everybody uses. And I had an ulterior motive, I must say. My ulterior motive was to keep the dashboard up to date and the visibility there current all the time. So me, procurement, finance would be on top of it all the time.
So that brings me on to what you may suggest in how to do in for somebody starting on this journey, and I'm interested to hear your views on what are the key things which somebody should be focusing on right on the outset to make sure that they're starting with the best foot forwards.
So as I shared, from my perspective, you first need to understand what there is already and what are the current needs. Or when I say current, it can be 6 months ahead, because it's pretty much current. It works. It goes by so fast.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so really understanding what is already there. And what I did, and I recommend it, is basically compare it. Okay, how do I apply, as I said, this process to the processes already approved in the company? Because a company like Amdocs and other companies that already created the process, there was some thinking behind it, some reasoning behind it. So it's not that we are out to get the business stuck or, create some hardship along the way. We have some kind of agenda. So I think mapping also the agenda and how do we work around it? Or not work around it, with it. How do we create the system? It would be different for any company, for each company, but I think some kind of the main stakeholders at any process should be the main stakeholders here. If somebody is missing from the chain, you will definitely get it quite a slap somewhere along the way.
Wow.
Definitely. So if, let's say, privacy is not part of the process, you will get some kind of lawsuit at some point. This will happen. I mean, that's why I was talking about preparation. Let's not wait for, you know, for reality to slap us in the face. Let's not wait for it. Let's just forecast that. And the best way to look ahead on something that is very, very new is through what we already know that works, and see where does it apply and where it doesn't apply. Because in some places it won't be relevant, that's fine. But we should ask ourselves, is there something that is replacing this thing that is not relevant? Why did we put this thing? The question is basically why? Why was it? Why is it that we do this process? There is always a reasoning, and then it's not copying the process, it's copying the reasoning and giving it some kind of answer. So that would be the first step for me. I know that, you know, we have a tendency, at least as Israelis, I don't know how it is worldwide, but we have a tendency just to take it and run. Let's say, okay, first let's go, and then we'll see along the way. See along the way, I remind you, $250,000. That's all. That's the price tag that I paid. I don't know what you will pay for it, but it's quite a hefty price tag to pay.
And that's kind of the benefit and the negatives of the cloud is yes, run, yes, do this quickly, yes, go forwards as quickly as possible. But what many are finding out now is that cost associated to running as fast as you can.
Exactly. And when you put in the infrastructure, you take the time to really create the infrastructure, then you can, you know, prevent, or at least find at a very early stage, cut off the risks.
Fascinating. And who would you say necessarily has the visibility and authority in order to do this mapping exercise and bring all these stakeholders together?
Actually, it would be different from company to company, but this is the reason why in Amdocs it's procurement. Why it's procurement? Because for procurement, for Amdocs, there are very, very little units that are really, really cross company, that everybody in the company uses their services. And facilities is one, and procurement is another one. But we are most of the units are not across the entire company. So this is the reason I took the role of a responsible adult here, is because I knew that I'm probably the only person that would have visibility about the entire thing, and that there's the kind of relationship that gives me, I don't know the authority, but at least the listening to, okay, let's work on that. I do have the authority, actually, because, you know,
Yeah.
as we say in Hebrew, my hand is on the, you know, tap.
Right.
Yeah,
and if you don't say go, then nobody gets what they need. And so
exactly, if I say, okay, we're cutting it off, then we're cutting it off. So it's not like that. Definitely, I don't have this. I mean, there are processes. It's not at any whim that I would have, but definitely, this is why procurement I listen to, and we need to at the lack of enrollment, or the before enrollment, we use power, unfortunately.
Right. And I think
I with enrollment whenever I can, though.
And I think that everybody will definitely have the understanding that they need something, and so if they need something, they have to include you and they have to get your buy-in, and so therefore there has to be a two-way relationship there.
I think when you like put yourself into that, you really enjoy what procurement can bring. I mean, we bring better agreements when we understand what the needs are. So as an example, I mean, I include in all of the agreements, I include the professional services hours as part of the agreement, even though it's not a standard agreement, because I understand that this is the need of the company at this point. They will need, or some unit will need more support because they already went the way, but the others didn't, or whatever. or we want to go the next step. We need some, I don't need to tell you how resources of, good resources at the cloud domain is scarce. I'm sure everybody on this call are very aware of it. It's very difficult to find good resources. I'm harnessing this, but this comes from me talking to the business unit and understanding the needs really deeply.
Absolutely. And so moving to number 2, where does this cloud budget start from?
So for us, it's part of the process that I told you as the online form. This would be part of the project of the process. The architecture that is one stage of the account creation would actually attach the budget according to the architecture chosen. And at that moment, when it's created, then the automation will create also in the dashboard the budget according to what was defined within the request itself. So we are working against the request and against a PO as well. So a purchase order, it depends on the business unit, but if it's a business unit that has a separate P&L, they need to create a purchase order, and the purchase order would be the budget itself. So they cannot open an account until they have a purchase order to cover their expenses, and this amount would be the budget, and it's all going automatically to the dashboard, which will provide them alerts monthly, weekly, according to what they requested, and of course, cost optimization options.
And was it necessary in advance to try and baseline what the budget would be to get some understanding?
Oh yeah. How would you know? How would you know? I mean, how do you know where you're going without a compass?
Okay, and where would that baseline, where would the data for creating that baseline come from necessarily?
So definitely when we map existing usage, we saw the run rate and we defined it by the run rate. But at the moment we began with the online form and this process. So the baseline is the architecture. This is the budget that is given. Then we work against it. Okay, so if you see that you're not in the zone where the budget should be, then we're going back to look at it before it becomes $250,000. We want to look at it. We want to see, are we increasing the budget? Are we optimizing the usage? What happened here? Why is it over budget, or the run rate would say that you'll finish the budget way ahead before you planned?
In the example where other service lines come in halfway through the term and you need to find budget from elsewhere, how would you then go about that? How does that get included?
Shouldn't be. It should all be part. I mean, it should all be part of the planning. Some cross services are paid by our IT, as you know. We don't charge the units for things that we consider as infrastructure for the cloud, let's say, yeah. So in order for us to have a cloud environment, we need some some firewalls and stuff like that. These costs are not bared by the business units. It's like as it would in a data center on premise, right? The IT would be so the same.
Okay, let's talk for a second about what's required from a resource perspective across the organization. Can you give us some sense of the needs, the foundational skills and expertise, etc., that are required across the organization in order to develop their strategy?
I think it's very helpful to have champions. So, like IT Cloud Center of Excellence or any other Cloud Center of Excellence, usually companies have just one. In Amdocs, we have 5. Usually, companies will have one. So choose one to run with. And basically, you need a champion at each business unit, because you need to somehow efficiently communicate with the end users, and it's hundreds of accounts. So the resources that are needed basically for our FinOps team, let's say, the way we created it are the way I visualized it as well, is that the FinOps team is a multifaceted team. So I know that a lot of companies, they are looking for a FinOps guy or girl or whatever person. It would be, they want the Swiss knife. They want somebody who is financial, they have financial orientation, but also somebody who is technical, that can work on the technical side of it. They need somebody who can actually spin up the account sometimes, or at least, create the cost optimization options. I mean, implement them. So there are different needs. And if we're talking about compliance, you need somebody who is very good at business analysis. So there are different facets. And when you take somebody that has all the capabilities, I think first of all, it's rare to find it. And second, you know how the scissors at the Swiss knife, they never cut really, really well.
Right.
You know? So my point of view is take three specialists, one in each domain, or 4 or 5, depending on the way you create the team, rather than 3 people that are all Swiss knives. Take one which is really good at business analysis, one which is really a great DevOps guy, and one that has some kind of vision and experience in governance. Governance is something that we haven't discussed, but it's a huge part of the FinOps team.
Okay.
Or the Cloud Center of Excellence, but you need to implement the governance. You need to understand how your vision can be actually realized. And the whole thing you really need this synergy, this working together, technical guys, DevOps guys, with the financial guys, with the governance. So unless you have a really cohesive team, you will get not like mediocre results. That's my, I believe. Yeah, I don't know that everybody's subscribe to this point of view. This is definitely my point of view.
I think it's a really interesting perspective, because it talks about what we mentioned earlier on in this webinar, about it being a very broad subject with lots of moving parts and lots of varied stakeholders. And since there is so many parts to this, it's really interesting to hear you say that it doesn't help being a jack of all trades, because ultimately you're then the master of none. You really need experts in each and every field who can deliver on the expertise required in order to really excel with a strategy. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also, it's very exciting also. So I found that the teams that work from the Cloud Center of Excellence, the FinOps team, these are guys that they are excited about it. They really want to deep dive into everything. Because if you're a tech guy and you stuck with the financial analysis, it's like the most boring thing in the world for you. But if you are a person that analysis really does it for you, then wow, the things that you can deep dive. I mean, thousands of lines of Excel, right? Each month. Wow. Isn't that exciting? So, yeah, I really think, and we haven't even discussed, the guys that are pricing the product to the customers of the company, which is a whole other, Pandora box.
I think there's another really interesting part of this, because FinOps is so new, that everybody, as you said a little bit earlier, is looking for that FinOps expert, when really that person's probably very difficult to find. And if you endlessly search for a FinOps expert, you'll probably not find them and not deliver on the strategy. Rather, build a team of several experts in different areas, and you're much more likely to A, get it started, and B, succeed. Would that be fair?
Oh, I agree with you so much, because it's a very new field. So there's not really much value in experience. Not saying there isn't, but it's constantly changing. So whatever the knowledge gap is, usually can be covered pretty quickly, especially by experts in their own field that are learning something new. It's easier for them. They speak the language.
Right.
So they adapt faster actually when it's somebody that is really, this is his expertise and he does some kind of adaptation. And as I said before, most of them are really, really enthusiastic about it also. It gives them something fresh, you know, to start to eat, like, you know, wow, this is really something different, same but different. I want to learn more about it. What can I do with it? The guys of automations, wow, I adore this guy. I told you before, automation is my favorite word.
And yeah, and that makes this whole idea of starting on FinOps much less daunting, because rather than searching for that needle in the haystack, we've got a much bigger resource which we can then pull upon in order to build out this incredibly important function.
More than that, I would say that if you're starting out also, you can really take some, you know, people that are already in capacities which are pretty much similar, and have them work on this project as part of, I mean, not full time, because I understand that it takes ramping up, right? Not for everybody. You start smaller usually. So, and then building the expertise of the team, then deciding, you know, yes, I'm taking it full time or not, but you know, starting with what you already have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is also very good because it takes a lot. When you really know your company and organization, you get much better results. If you take somebody that is, or somebody already within the company, already understand the product, they don't start from scratch, their ability to give value is much higher. That, I don't know, I think so. Just occurred to me.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea that, you know, we're starting on this and we're talking about the first 90 days. And obviously within the first 90 days, we need somebody who can ramp immediately. And so if we can identify those individuals within the business who can contribute incredibly quickly, then we should really look for those. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. There's a really interesting idea, and you've mentioned a number of different pieces about the various stakeholders within the business who are contributing to this, and perhaps trying to break the bad habits which the cloud has led us to, and rather encouraging some type of responsibility where previously there was none. I'd love to know how you've managed to deliver this at Amdocs, and if you have any advice on for people who are really looking to share this best practice in their own companies.
Oh, well, my personal motto, let's say, is always bring value. So I always want to understand the need and bring the best result, the best solution possible. And when I approached the stakeholders, the business units, definitely everybody was like a bit apprehensive, didn't want to talk to me, you know, deferred me, like, no. But once we got started and I really got interested in the pain points, so that would be my first, if you want to get this alignment, be interested and investigate the pain points. You have the pain points, you share your pain points, and you understand the business pain points. And then when you address their pain points and saying, this is what we need as a company, and I understand what you need, and let's create some kind of solution here, then this is aligning the company, because I'm giving you value that you didn't expect to get from me, because I requested you to share what is difficult for you, and I really addressed it. And so this is one. And the visibility, having the information very, very accessible, very visible, is contributing to this responsibility that you were talking about. So it's like, you know, when the bank sends you the the SMS saying you are overdrawn, or you just used your credit card for X amount of shekels. Yes, this creates it. So the same, when you create a system of visibility, accessibility, information by push, then this is, needs to be addressed.
Interesting. Interesting. And that's also effective, particularly with engineers who are very, for lack of better words, stuck in their way. I mean, everybody has been doing this for a while, and they like the way that they've been delivering. Do you find that's an easy stakeholder to encourage this type of responsibility with?
Fortunately, this is not with me, but we created a lot of automation, which makes it easier for them to cost optimize. So
Okay.
it's really visible. They see that they utilize only 2%. So come on. And they don't, and then they just need to click and say, yes, I approve. And there runs an automation that creates this cost optimization option. So really, we try to do it as effortless as possible. This is Dan Ariely. Whoever knows Dan Ariely said, when you want to change habits, go with the easiest and effortless way to change the habits. So this is what we're trying to do with the engineers. And if we need to apply some pressure, money always works. So
money always works.
Money always works. When we say sorry, out of budget, that's it. Always works. But I don't resort to that unless it's absolutely necessary to enforce it forcefully. I don't like using force.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, we're getting close to the hour, and I just want to see whether we have any questions coming in. One question coming in is, what are the quick wins that you experienced, as well as the longer term objectives 4 years on into starting this strategy?
I think quick wins are whenever you implement cost optimization. Wow, this is, I mean, sometimes most of it is so simple and so accessible by any tool, by any tool, really so simple. Scheduling, tagging, and resizing, not exactly, close to it, something like that. Yeah, and doing those, this is a very quick win. It happens all the time. Again, we have in our dashboard, we see and we show our customers, you are in 2% utilization. This is a very quick win, very quick win. So in terms of savings, it's really, it's easier than you may think. The long terms would be to have the knowledge and the resources to build correctly. This is something that, you know, once an environment is running, you usually will not change it. So this is also for all the people that are scared of vendor lock. When you say vendor lock, they say, no, I don't want to be vendor locked. Come on, nobody changes the environment unless they have to. Let's be honest here. Now I'm procurement and I'm saying it. Nobody changes the vendor unless they have to. And you won't change it for a few dollars here and there. Like, you know, they're trying to say, yes, we'll put it on the Kubernetes. Yeah, on the Dockers, we'll move it from one. It won't happen. You need to be realistic. So when you have, for the long term, bring the knowledge in to build it more efficiently, because every environment could be built in at least three ways. Some would, and the same function can cost $100 per month or $1,000 per month, doing the same thing. So this is something that takes time to learn this, learn how to utilize the bring your own license and all the things that we discussed about, like briefly about software. This is also something that takes time to learn. And what else? Definitely the agreements, the long-term agreements that we won't discuss and I won't disclose anyway, but the long-term agreements that are benefiting the company, not only discount-wise, as I said, there are many facets to it. And when you really understand the needs, you can bring better value.
Fabulous. All right, well, thank you very much for a really fascinating conversation. I tell you, I love listening to experts like yourself to really understand about the complexity of the challenge at hand. There's a huge amount to do, and you have this wonderful way of breaking this down into small bite-sized chunks to realize that it is achievable. And even with the complexity involved, and with the complexity both from a technical perspective as well as from a personnel perspective in the various business units, it's achievable, and you need to put in the baby steps in order to get this long-term objective. And it's fascinating to hear you've done that, and I really appreciate all your time for explaining to us about it. So thank you very much, Jeanette. It's been a great pleasure. All right, well, thank you everybody. Thank you for joining, and talk to you again soon.
Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.